Welcome, my friend. Hello. I am the proprietor, Dr. John. If you have any questions, I will be happy to assist.
Great. My name is Knight, and I'll probably take you up on that.
Flickering candles lend an appropriately spooky atmosphere to the museum. The Voodoo shrine is filled with items that both fascinate Gabriel and also make his skin crawl.
They lend a certain psychotic ambiance, no? Will that look sacrilegious? Will that look sacrilegious? Wonder who that poor bastard was. This coffin is so small. A waste of some perfectly good wine, if you ask me. It wouldn't be much of a voodoo museum without a voodoo doll. Magenta Moonbeam. Voodoo Inn.
A flyer advertising Magenta Moonbeam, a local Voodoo Inn. Her parlor is on the corner of Orleans and Dauphine. A street drummer has settled outside the museum. The back wall displays various voodoo items, such as offerings of fruits to the voodoo deities. That must be Marie Laveau. An authentic-looking pole marks the center of the room. Authentic what? Gabriel isn't sure. An official voodoo wishing stump. Rub it and make a wish, a card says.
Funny, I say the same thing to women. I wish Malia Getty were mine forever. Really, I mean it.
What was that?
Huh? Nothing.
A very large, very formidable-looking snake is secured in a plexiglass cage. The snake is too far away.
The python is quite dangerous. I would stay back if I were you.
Thanks for the advice.
A beaded gourd is on display. There's a beaten-up old fan in the window. It's silent at the moment. It's an electrical switch.
What does this do?
Turn that thing off.
Oh, sorry.
We have air conditioning, you see.
Yeah, I see.
Dr. John is a huge man. If his manner weren't so pleasant, he'd be intimidating.
Could I ask you a few questions?
That is why I am here.
What do you know about the Voodoo murders?
The killings in the newspaper. I know they have nothing to do with true voodoo in New Orleans.
What makes you think the voodoo murders aren't being done by local practitioners?
Voodoo is a popular boogeyman, Mr. Knight, especially in New Orleans. Anyone can pretend to use it, just as anyone can pretend to be a black belt in karate. And for the same reason, to intimidate. I know voodoo in this city, Mr. Knight, and believe me, it is not about killing. Even the police have stated that the killings have nothing to do with local voodoo.
So you know nothing about the voodoo murders case?
I neither know nor care to know, Mr. Knight. My only possible interest is in how it might affect the public's attitude towards the museum. So far, it has not been an issue. No one has even had the bad taste to bring it up. Until you, that is.
What do you think of New Orleans?
It is the only city in the United States, as far as I am concerned.
What is it about New Orleans that you so admire?
It has a real culture of its own, Mr. Knight. Amid the horrid blandness that is Americana, New Orleans alone has a voice.
Spoken like a true New Orleanian. Do you know anything about snakes?
Ah, you have perhaps noticed the museum snake, Mr. Knight? They are beautiful creatures. Do you not agree? And the tourists seem to associate them with voodoo.
Is this snake yours? Do you use it in your practice of voodoo?
I admire the spirit of the snake, Mr. Knight. But snakes like the museums can be quite dangerous to handle.
You didn't really answer my question.
I think I did, Mr. Knight.
Tell me about yourself.
Me?
Yes, if you don't mind.
What is it you wish to learn?
Why did you open a voodoo museum?
The subject has fascinated me all my life, and I wanted to help preserve the cultural heritage it represents.
What kind of background in voodoo do you have?
Let us just say I cut my teeth on it, Mr. Knight. It is in my blood.
Do you do anything besides run the museum?
No, the museum does not make me a rich man, but my material needs are simple. I prefer to focus on my one true interest in life.
What are your own religious beliefs?
My beliefs are too personal and too complex to discuss with a layman, Mr. Knight.
Do you know Malia Getty?
Should I?
She referred me to your museum.
Many have read about our museum in the newspapers, Mr. Knight.
That's a good point. Just tell me anything.
I am originally from the West Indies myself, you know.
Really? What brought you to New Orleans?
I was drawn here for personal reasons.
Just tell me anything.
I am a vegetarian.
Really? I can't imagine living without meat.
That must be the hunter in you, Mr. Knight.
Just tell me anything.
I am not an easy person to get to know. I am a very private man.
Isn't that unusual for someone in the museum business?
Not at all. My displays speak for me.
Just tell me anything.
Not everyone can come see the museum, so I occasionally do public speaking on the subject of historical voodoo.
Anything coming up that I might attend?
No. But then you have me all to yourself right now, do you not?
Actually, I can't think of a thing.
Then let us discuss something else.
So how is the museum business?
Those who truly seek to understand are few, Mr. Knight. But even one can be an audience.
Sounds about like my shop. So where do you pick up all this stuff?
Oh, here and there. We accept donations of any pertinent items.
Do you ever get any wackos in here?
You mean, besides yourself?
Yeah, besides me.
I do not care to make those kinds of judgments, Mr. Knight. All are welcome here.
You're a big guy, aren't you? You work out, play sports?
I do not play basketball, if that is what you want to know.
Who, me? No, you just look like such a natural athlete.
I do find ways of keeping fit, Mr. Knight. After all, our bodies are temples.
You sound like Grace. I should get the two of you together.
Is Grace your wife?
No, she just acts like it. So what do you think of our summer weather? Have you ever seen it so overcast or so muggy?
It is unpleasant. The heavens are not pleased these days.
Nice outfit.
I prefer simple cotton to dead flesh, Mr. Knight.
I'll have to remember that. This is quite a place you have here.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. I have dedicated myself to the preservation of this unique culture. It is gratifying to see others reap the fruits I have sown.
What can you tell me about voodoo?
Historical voodoo, or the voodoo currently practiced in the city.
Tell me about historical voodoo.
Very well. I will start at the beginning, Mr. Knight, and will go on from there at your prompting.
Sounds good.
As you may know, voodoo is a grassroots religion, formed by the mixing together of many different African tribal religions and Anglo religions, such as Catholicism or Protestantism. In other words, it is a religion born of the African slave trade. But African slaves were imported not only by the United States, but also into the West Indies, where the French and Spanish ran plantation islands. Prior to 1803, the New Orleans area was owned by France. The French Creole in those days owned many African slaves. But the Creole did not permit their slaves to gather, giving no chance for voodoo to breed here natively. The Creole also knew enough about the corrupted pagan practices of the West Indies slaves to ban the importings of slaves from that region.
So how did voodoo come to New Orleans?
After the Louisiana Purchase, American legislators relaxed regulations. Slaves were permitted to gather. The Americans also removed the ban on West Indies slaves. Around the same time, a slave revolt occurred in Santo Domingo, what is now Haiti. Between the lifting of the ban and the Haitian Revolt, West Indies slaves began pouring into New Orleans. Some of them were free people of color, freed or escaped slaves. Some came with their white owners who were fleeing from the revolt.
What happened when the West Indies slaves got here?
They brought voodoo with them. The native slaves were more than enthusiastic about embracing it. It gave them power, Mr. Knight, if only in the form of a communal bond. Among the first meeting places were the Bayou St. John and the shore of Lake Pontchartrain. The early voodoos were heavy snake worshippers, worshipping the one they called the Great Zombie.
Tell me more about historical voodoo.
By 1817, the voodoo activities were beginning to cause fear among the white slave owners. An ordinance was passed to forbid slave gatherings except in designated public areas at designated times. The time was Sunday afternoons, and the place, Congo Square. The slaves and free people of color gathered to dance simulations of their voodoo dances, right in sight of Creole society. Of course, they also continued to meet in private for the real thing.
Tell me more about historical voodoo.
There were a variety of kings and queens at first, voodoo priests and priestesses. But from about 1830, a single power emerged. This was a voodoo queen named Marie Laveau. Marie Laveau ruled voodoo in New Orleans for many years.
Are you sure you can't tell me anything about voodoo?
I've given you as much detail as I can, Mr. Knight. Look around the museum if you desire more information.
Tell me about current voodoo.
Many people think of voodoo in terms of magic spells or gree-gree. That kind of practice is actually called hoodoo and is only a part of true voodoo. Voodoo, the religion, has a strong following in New Orleans. In fact, it is growing quite rapidly. There are several voodoo churches or temples in the city, and others all across the United States. African Americans see it as a tradition all their own. Whites, and there are many in the religion, are attracted to it because they think it is exotic. I personally am more interested in the history of voodoo. Some of the new movements are copying Haitian or even African voodoo, but it is the voodoo of New Orleans that I find so intriguing.
What exactly is hoodoo?
Hoodoo refers to magic folk traditions of the South. Hoodoo is a bastard of voodoo. Many of the gree-gree are similar, but hoodoo does not have the religious aspects of voodoo.
Tell me about Marie Laveau.
There were actually two Marie Laveaux, mother and daughter. Most people thought they were the same woman. Her continued youth added to the mystique. The original, the mother, was also known as Widow Paris. It was she that began the empire.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
The Laveau tomb, where one or both of the Maries are believed to be buried, is in St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. It is a popular shrine for practitioners and tourists alike. I myself take tours through the cemetery on a regular basis.
Really? Do you have any running this week?
No, but the cemetery is open to the general public as well.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
When the widow Paris began to practice, there were many voodooians in the city. By 1830, she was voodoo queen of all New Orleans. The widow Paris was a hairdresser for rich Creole ladies. She also paid household servants to spy for her. Between the two, she knew everything about everyone who mattered in New Orleans. She was not above using her information to appear psychic, to intimidate, or even to blackmail.
You sound as though you admire her.
For a black woman in the mid-1800s to gain power is an incredible thing, Mr. Knight. However she achieved it.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
She kept a pet snake, danced with it too. She held traditional voodoo ceremonies out by the lake. She took herself seriously, very seriously. But she was not above selling tickets for her events to curiosity seekers. She was not above using voodoo any way she could to make money. That is for certain. But if she had been in another line of work, in another age, that would have been interpreted as entrepreneurial genius, rather than a sign of fraudulence.
Hey, you don't need to convince me. I admire anyone that can actually make a living. Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
It was Marie Laveau who defined the voodoo that is truly and uniquely the voodoo of New Orleans. She invented hundreds, if not thousands, of spells, potions, charms, and incantations. These form the basis of the modern practice, not to mention the folk tradition of hoodoo.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
Her daughter, Marie Glapion, took over when Widow Paris got old. Most people thought it was the same Marie Laveau. Both Maries encouraged that point of view. The Widow Paris died in 1881. Marie Glapion had been reigning a long time by then. After the death of the Widow Paris, other voodoo queens surfaced, and by 1890, the cult was fragmented again. Marie Glapion just sort of faded away.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
You have heard everything about Marie Laveau that a layman might expect to understand.
Tell me about yourself.
I do not care for small talk, Mr. Knight.
Goodbye, Dr. John.
Walk carefully out there, Mr. Knight.
An old man tends the cemetery with movements akin to a slow drawl.
Could I have a minute of your time?
What you need, boy?
What can you tell me about voodoo?
They say it was part of an old religion from Africa, brought here by slaves.
What can you tell me about voodoo?
I don't really care to talk about it. I don't do it none myself.
What do you know about the voodoo murders?
Isn't it just awful, them finding those bodies with the voodoo things around them? I don't think there's any real voodoo going on. Somebody trying to cover their tracks is all.
What do you know about the voodoo murders?
I told you all I know about that.
What can you tell me about New Orleans?
Seem like everyone wants to visit New Orleans at least once in their lives. And they love the cemetery tours. I see tourists in here every day of the year.
What can you tell me about New Orleans?
There are lots of things to see here, but none as beautiful as St. Louis Cemetery #1.
What can you tell me about New Orleans?
If you want to know more, you should ask someone else.
Do you know anything about snakes?
Snakes? I see snakes around here all the time. Most of them aren't poisonous, of course. I don't mind snakes myself, but lots of folks are afraid of them.
Do you know anything about snakes?
I told you all I know about that.
Tell me something about St. Louis Cemetery #1.
You know why the dead are buried in tombs and not in the ground, don't you? The water table's too high. Them coffins will float right out of their graves. Ha! Them dead will go floating right down into the Dakota. Of course, if it were Mardi Gras, nobody'd even notice. It's a historical place. People buried in here from the Civil War. Back further, too. Take a look around. You'll see.
Tell me something about St. Louis Cemetery #1.
Just look around. You'll get the feel of the place.
Tell me about yourself.
My name is Toussaint Gervais. I'm the watchman here at St. Louis #1.
What exactly do you do here?
Oh, I keep the place tidy, of course. But a big part of my job, too, is looking out for the grievers, you know. People come to pay their respects, and they need looking out for. Sometimes they so grief-bound, they don't know what they doing.
Tell me about yourself.
That's about all there is to say.
You been working here a long time?
Longer than you've been alive, son. I may perhaps be here longer than you'll be alive, for that matter.
Kind of a quiet job you've got, isn't it?
Most of the time, yeah. They act up some at the full moon, though.
You must enjoy the company of dead folks.
Unlike the living, they ain't never given no reason to dislike 'em none.
How's business today?
About like every day. It's what you call a seller's market.
Do you know anything about Marie Laveau?
Sure. She was the voodoo queen of New Orleans, a powerful voodooian and a powerful sorceress. Believers still come to her tomb, you know. They write secret marks on the walls, leave offerings. Then there's the tourists. They come out of curiosity. As a matter of fact, that big Dr. John fella from that Voodoo Museum, he's here at least once a day. But Marie Laveau's tomb isn't the only one the believers visit and make markings and leave offerings at.
What else can you tell me about Marie Laveau?
Her tomb's on all our tours. Even the Baptists come round here to gawk. Of course, you may not know this, but some of the real serious voodoo types argue that she ain't in this one at all, but down in the unmarked tomb in #3. It's all the same to me, I say. Saved me a lot of cleanup work if she weren't here, if you ask me.
You said there were other mock tombs?
Yep, I've seen bull hearts left on tombs and a nest of vulture feathers, plates of peas and congreve, animal parts, human parts even, it looked like. Male parts, if you get my meaning. And this is one of the great family crypts, mind you. Odd how them types just pick a spot and stick to it.
What other tombs got marked? Can you show me?
No, I ain't one for naming names. I don't like to encourage that kind of thing. It's distressing to the families, and rightly so.
The old man is apparently doing some cleanup work. Food, trinkets, and more unsettling things have been left at Marie Laveau's tomb as offerings from believers.
No thanks.
A plaque on the tomb reads, Laveau. This is the tomb of Marie Laveau, Voodoo Queen of Narlands. Near the Laveau tomb is a piece of red brick, undoubtedly a cast-off from spiritual graffiti writers. Odd-looking marks adorn the Laveau tomb wall. The wall doesn't work that way.
I want a copy of these strange marks.
The marks are reddish in color and remind Gabriel of crosses. They look like they've been here a few days at least. This old tomb is in a sorry state of disrepair. There's probably no one left in the family to maintain it. The name Ross is inscribed on this old tomb.
My family's tomb is down that way, past the Ross tomb.
The marble denizens of the cemetery only stare back blankly.
I don't need to go visit the family tomb today.
This tomb almost looks like a little house.
But I wouldn't want to live there.
A stone angel stands silently before a tomb. The marble denizens of the cemetery only stare back blankly. Most of the plaster has fallen away over the years to reveal walls of red brick. A stone angel leans down to gaze at something unseen. Two enormous vases flank the front of the Getty tomb. An angel draped dramatically over a stone plinth marks the entrance to a large tomb. The imposing tomb is elaborately labeled Getty. There's a small marble plate near the tomb doors. It's locked shut. The plate is in locked position. There's a keyhole on the plate, but Gabriel can't operate that without a key.